Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Macomb Township Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, July 6, 2021 to order. Would you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Mr. Bentley, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hardy.
Here.
Mr. Nunzio.
Here. It's okay.
Provenzano. I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's my first or last name.
Thank you. Mr. Tuckfield.
Here.
Mr. Shudo.
Here.
Mr. Spataforo.
Here.
Mr. Oliver.
Here.
Mr. Bentley here.
Okay.
All present.
Next item on our agenda is the approval of previous meeting minutes. Is there any discussion?
I have one question, and I think we need to address. How about the exclusion of member Provenzano from the roll call vote? Do we need to add that to the minutes?
Let's ask our attorney.
Yes, I think we conferred before, it's appropriate to have that motion included in the agenda.
Okay.
It was a motion and voted on, and so that should be added to the meeting minutes.
Okay. So with that being added, does anyone have anything else? Mr. Bentley, did you have anything?
Resolved, and nothing needs to be added
Okay.
this time.
I'll make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes as read
With the changes that you...
with the changes.
Okay. Motion made by Mr. Shudo,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Spataforo. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Opposed? I guess I should say opposed. Anyone? No? Okay. Approval of the agenda for tonight. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Motion by Mr. Oliver, supported by Mr. Provenzano. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. First item under new business. Site plan, Walden Park. Get my glasses on for this one. Permanent parcel 0828101,009, located on the east side of Romeo Plank Road, a quarter mile north of 21 Mile, Section 28, M&C Limited of Utica, LLC Petitioner. Mr. Box.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. So items A and B under new business are very linked. It's largely the same development. So I'm going to mention a few things that pertain to both of them. This was something that was before you, I believe, in 2019 as a rezoning. It was recommended for approval by this planning commission, but was denied by the board. At that time, it did go through the court system, and a consent agreement was reached with the township and the petitioner. As part of that consent agreement, many of the items that would typically be through the site plan process, including building height, location, parking spaces, were agreed to through the court system. Largely what is to be discussed tonight is the landscaping and screening for this property. And I think that's important to note, so we kind of keep our discussion related to those items, as everything else, as I mentioned, was already approved through the court system. So I don't know, Mr. Aloya, if you wanted to mention anything with regards to that.
So the consent judgment is similar to like the general plan that we look at for PUDs. So it outlined everything, and it was an agreement between the township and the developer to resolve this development. The township was sued because the developer believed that there was not sufficient housing for the elderly, and this development is aimed squarely at people ages 55 and older, and so it's a mixed-use development for that purpose. So all those elements, as outlined by Mr. Box, were approved in the general plan, and so although you have authority to approve the final site plan, many elements of this final site plan are really determined pursuant to the consent judgment. The discretionary areas include the landscaping. But even in the consent judgment, for instance, it states a landscape plan consistent with applicable zoning ordinance, and this consent judgment shall be included in the final site plan, subject to the following. Evergreen trees will be installed along the Clinton River. The developer shall seed and maintain the ITC consumer power corridor in an orderly and sightly condition, but sodding, irrigation shall not be required. Interior sidewalks shall be concrete, and the 10-foot pathway shown on the Walden concept plan shall be concrete or asphalt as the developer may elect. So that addresses landscaping, but as Mr. Bach said, things like building elevations, access, things of that nature have already been decided.
Okay.
Thank you. With regards to the site plan itself, I think Mr. Skirdo here is going to lead a lot of this discussion today. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, thank you. As you see on the screen in front of you, item 1 is what's called Walden. Item 1 is called Walden Park. This is a low-rise residential development consisting of duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. These are condominium development. Item 2 is what we term Blossom Meadows and Walden Village. Walden Village is a collection of apartment complexes, maximum height of 3 stories or 52 feet. Blossom Meadows is could be independent living all the way through memory care facility, maximum height 3 stories. And the Blossom Meadows complex would be at the located near the would be the southwest corner of the property, right off Romeo Plank. The Walden Village Apartments and Clubhouse will extend from Romeo Plank out and then spread across near the conservation easement. Both developments do have a wide conservation easement. Have a wide conservation easement along the river, as well as Mr. Loya mentioned, there is some requirements for tree planting and other items in there in addition to the conservation easement. In terms of your landscaping, the CF Community Facilities District does require it would be the north property line and Romeo Plank, does require an 8-foot green belt. That 8-foot green belt in excess, there actually is a large excess of 8 feet, is going to be maintained between those 2 areas. In terms of the type of landscaping, along the north property line, there is a wooded strip that will be maintained in addition to the 8-foot green belt that would provide adequate landscape screening. Along the conservation easement, there is, the plan does show 41 evergreen trees and 12 deciduous trees being planted in addition to the easement. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, okay, let me reorient you. Again, the conservation easement in the east is in the green. The building outlines are shown in kind of the ochre or brownish color. What I talked about in terms of preserving the woodlands, they'll be at the top of the north property line. There's a wooded strip of vegetation. They will remain, that will be there in addition to you'll see in the blue circle up top, you'll see that will be maintained. Romeo Plank, they will have 16 deciduous trees of large and small mixture. They will have 86 large and small mixture of evergreens, including small grass features and undergrowth. That's in the green along Romeo Plank. Along the conservation easement, I'll back up and mention they're going to have 41 large and small evergreen trees, as well as 12, a combination of large and small deciduous ornamental trees. That's about it for the landscaping. The area that does meet ordinance requirements, and the amount of landscaping shown does go above and beyond what is required. But by ordinance, However, the trees and items along the conservation easement, that in addition meets the consent judgment. And at that point, I'll hold off from there, see if there's any questions on that point before I get on to the next part, item 2.
We got more?
I also wanted to point out one thing, just in the consent judgment as well, which I should further clarify, is that the site plan approval is subject to the approval of all the appropriate departments within the township as well, engineering, planning, whatnot, which goes without saying, but we should put that on the record. And as you know in your packet, all the departments have reviewed this to date, so you're reviewing a site plan that has been reviewed and commented on by all the appropriate departments.
Thank you, Mr. Loy. Is there anything else, Mr. Box or Mr. Skirdo? No.
Not on this item.
Not on this item.
Okay. I have a question, real quick, before we bring the petitioner up. We're talking about landscaping and it
Yes.
kind of, the two site plans kind of butt up against the river.
Yeah, correct.
Do we talk tonight about flooding or any of that kind of stuff, or is that for another time, Mr. Box?
Flooding and the items like that, as Mr. Loya just pointed out, will be underneath the approval of the township engineer, the State Eagle agency, and Macomb County Drain Commission. There might be issues of, you can ask us, but these are really expertises, and they've got some really strict guidelines they have to follow along the way.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that comes later in the process, correct?
Yeah, later on with those agencies and the township engineer.
Okay.
correct. I was just going to add that is the next step beyond site plan. They would go through
Yes.
the engineering process. And any, drainage or flooding issues would be addressed at that time. Anything that the engineering department or the State Eagle agency, as Mr. Skirdo just mentioned, or the County Drain Commission, if they see deficiencies or anything that they would not approve of, they will not approve it, and it will essentially come back to this board or this commission with a revised site plan, something that can be designed to meet their needs.
Okay. And with these two sites, how much green space is there? I know we have buildings that are 3 stories high, so there should be,
As far as acreage, I don't know that number off the top of my head. I don't know if the petitioner would know that number, but I do know that from any building on this site, as well as the next item on the agenda that we'll talk about, I believe there's well over 400 feet from any structure on this site to any structure on the opposite side of the river.
okay, thank you. Is the petitioner, would you come up, please? Please state your name and your address for the record.
Good evening, Mario Izzy with MJC Companies, we're M&C Limited as well.
Hold on just a minute. I think we need you at the podium.
Gotta go to the podium.
Yep, we need you at the podium.
Sorry.
I think last time we were.
Yeah. This is our last Zoom meeting, so we need that station for the Zoom, those listening at home.
Okay, start again for
No
us.
problem. Good evening. Mario Izzy with MJC Companies, M&C Limited. We're the owner and developer of this project. Thank you for having us this evening. Address is 46600 Romeo Plank, Suite number 5. We don't have a presentation prepared for you this evening. The last time we were in front of this commission, we left here with a recommendation, and we thank you for that. Unfortunately, when we got to the Board of Trustees, that level, they didn't see your point of view, our point of view. And unfortunately, we had to take the route that we took. I didn't want it. I didn't want to get it to this point. As you know, the amount of developments that we do in Macomb Township, we want to have a working relationship with the township, with the departments, with the Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission. So reluctantly, we're here this evening with the consent judgment before you. We still feel this is a very, very quality development. One of the biggest changes since the last time you saw the site plan, we were presenting 16 buildings. We now have 15, so we lost 1 building. The landscape has increased tremendously. The open space, to answer one of the commissioner's questions, as far as the park goes, I believe almost 42% of our site is deemed as open area, open space, and that's on sheet number 2 of the submitted drawings. That's for the park, and the village if I may. Upland open area remaining 50.57%. So that's not something we would normally present, and certainly in a single-family development, but because we're asking for some discretion, we're going up instead of out, to try to increase permeable pervious area. That's going to be critical as far as our storm drainage, our retention, and I understand that the residents in the community are very sensitive to this. We've got a lot of hoops to jump through as far as engineering goes. As the planners have both mentioned, we have to not only go through the township engineering department as far as floodplain studies and hydraulic analysis, we have to go through the county. We have to go through Eagle at the state level, probably going to be at EPA as well. So in my heart, I believe by the time we're done, this drainage will be improved, because we always have a fudge factor that we add into whatever our amount of volume and storage that we have to impose on the site. We try to make sure that there's a little bit more than what's required just in case. So, and this project will remain in our inventory. It's a rental project. So we will have a lot of pride on this project, and I'm sure everybody's going to be very proud of it when it's done. Any questions? I can sit down, or I can remain here for any questions.
Why don't you remain here and
Yes, sir.
then there, and then we'll open it up to commissioners. Commissioner, Mr. Bentley?
One question, I believe it's be directed towards Mr. Box. The perimeter, north perimeter and the south perimeter, you've encircled those existing vegetations, the trees and that will be maintained. Is there a requirement that screening be maintained to at least the end of the building development, such that it would go, another, I don't know, 100, 200 feet? Is that a requirement, or is there sufficient screening on both the north and the south with those openings?
The way the ordinance reads, the only requirement for that is an 8-foot green belt. There is no requirement for types of trees or anything because they abut a residential zone. They are going to maintain that vegetation. I'm sure it's an ask that this commission can make if they want to extend the tree line or shrub line or whatever to match wherever the building line is.
Are you, just so I'm clear, are you referencing, see if I can get my cursor on the screen here, this area here near Building 5?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And in between on the south
See
end,
the south end?
because yes, they need an 8-foot screen, but lengthwise needs to be addressed.
So the ordinance requirement is an 8-foot green belt, so there is more than 8 feet of green space between the building and the property boundary. As far as screening, there is no requirement in those areas for any screening beyond the 8-foot green belt that is there.
Okay, so the adjacent to the north is residential, correct?
Yes.
And there's no screening required between that residential area and this new development?
An 8-foot green
Residential.
belt is what's required.
Even though it's higher rise
Yes,
or
correct.
mid-rise?
Correct.
Well, this is Walden Park. This is a single-story development. The item number 2 on the agenda, and again, we've kind of been talking about both. Well, the one you're looking at on the screen right now, I believe is just a 1-story
Correct.
development. The southern piece of this development is the one that has the 3-story developments within it.
Then I stand corrected.
Okay. Anyone else?
I got a question.
Mr. Oliver?
To our planners, being that we are only talking tonight about landscaping, do our tree, on this plan, do the trees that they've submitted, the styles, the varieties, do they meet our ordinance, they meet our requirements, the size?
The ordinance does not have any requirements for tree sizes. So anything they put in is above and beyond what is required by ordinance, all the number of trees that they're putting in and shrubs.
So we don't specifically have a size tree when, on our, these plans will specify what size they're gonna be.
Their plans specify what size they're gonna be, but our ordinance does not.
Our ordinance don't.
It doesn't, yes.
Right,
And,
okay.
yes,
They're substantial.
Because it appears that they're sized pretty well
Yeah.
to start with.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All of our apartment communities, we go above and beyond on our landscape, probably to a fault because it adds to our maintenance costs. But we feel long-term curb appeal. We're trying to attract a renter. We're trying to attract a quality tenant, and unfortunately, the cost does go up a little bit in order to maintain a standard in the community. But we feel long-term, it just adds to the curb appeal and the value of our projects. So we generally will over landscape and over even the hardscape, the entrance walls. If you look at your package, I think it's pretty typical of what an MJC development apartment community what we'll do, and I think it's pretty high quality.
I could see that. There's a lot of trees in this project.
We have a lot of time, money, and effort invested in this site. We don't want to let anybody down. We are taxpayers in the community. Our offices are in the community. We have a vested interest in this as well. This is just down the street from our main offices. So,
Thank you, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, I had a
Mr.
couple
Tuffield?
questions.
Sure.
I did have a few for Mr. Loy, if I could, just to make sure that I'm correctly understanding what we have in front of us tonight. So there's several aspects of this, I believe. One aspect is that it is rezoned CF, community facilities. Is that separate from the use? Obviously, both are within here, but is that a separate from the use? So, for example, at some future time, could they go and build some other facility on it, or would they have to have the consent amended at that point? In other words, the two things live separately. I'm not sure if that's making any sense.
I'm not sure I am, because today's the date for final site plan, so they're asking to build this today.
Correct, although we're very not right or wrongly, but we're limited in
Right.
here. I believe that there's a very long list of other items that they could potentially build on CF. Would they have, and community housing, I think there was like helipads and any number
Yeah,
of.
those items are outlined in the consent agreement. They are limited to 3 stories. They're limited to this residential development. Those other items are not allowed.
So that I guess that's what I'm asking. It's living together. This is the use that's spelled out for it.
Yeah, the
Okay.
concept plan is a part of the consent agreement.
Yes,
And-
thank you.
And specifically to your earlier point, what is left for the planning commission is the landscaping on the property. Could you,
Well, you're approving the final site plan, but with the understanding that through the consent, that this planning commission is bound by the terms of the consent judgment, where the general consent, the concept plan has been approved, and and it outlines many of the elements.
the elements to it?
Yep, and really the open issue for this board to determine today is the landscaping, so it can approve the final site plan.
Understood. And you quoted a specific sentence there with regards to landscaping. Obviously, Mr. Box indicated, I think we only require a green space in the ordinance. But there was another sentence that you had there from the consent. Is it possible if you read that again, just briefly?
Absolutely.
I should have noted it down when you wrote it, or read it, but I
It was a
didn't.
long sentence, I forgive you. It said, "The landscape plan consistent with the applicable zoning ordinance and this consent judgment shall be included in the final site plan, subject to the following. Evergreen trees will be installed along the Clinton River." So that's the first one. "Developer shall seed and maintain the ITC Consumers Power Corridor in an orderly and sightly condition, but sodding irrigation shall not be required. Interior sidewalks shall be concrete, and the 10-foot pathway shown on the Walden concept plan shall be concrete or asphalt as the developer may elect." So, maybe the planning department should comment on some of those things that are reflected in here, to explain where those are at. And, but in any regard, the final site plan, as a condition could be that it's approved and the developer subject to the terms of the consent judgment. So that's incorporated in any final approval.
And obviously, Mr. Box or Mr. Skirdo are welcome to chime in on that, but I'm pretty sure from,
I can chime in on that.
I was gonna say, my reading was those are all.
Yes, the
those are-
trees, we're talking about a couple of items, the trees along the Clinton River, are the ones that I mentioned, the conservation easement along Walden Park. They're going to have a total of 41 large and small evergreens in addition, also 12 large or small deciduous trees. The same issue will happen the next time up. The
And that's where
item, seed maintain the ITC Consumers Power Corridor. It doesn't show up on this plan here,
Next
but
one.
south, you understand, there's a big corridor. And so they're going to maintain and mow and maintain that area underneath the power corridor in a natural condition, but they aren't going to run the irrigation lines all the way through there. Finally, the 10-foot path that the developer can either do in concrete or asphalt. That's a path that goes, it will be a public path that runs along the edge of the river and connects up to Waldenburg Park. So it's a continuation as a first step of trying to get a public pathway through there, and it'll be on the MJC property. In addition, just south of the development you see above you, they will put in a parking lot. There will be they'll be open to the public with a connection to that public trail system. So that's what this section speaks to.
Very good. But to the statement in the consent, those are the things that we're really looking at this evening, if I'm understanding.
No, I think those are items that the planning commission has to take into consideration, but that's not everything. It's the entire landscape plan and the final site plan.
I guess there'd be only one other thing that I would mention, and this was my memory from the original review. Mr. Izzy, I think for after the first time we looked at this, I guess this would be early 19, had put in one of the drawings a berm along the river. I believe the intent at the time was to screen housing on the south side of the river. And that was one of my concerns when I saw this drawing. I was concerned about the landscaping and water going together in this particular case. And I just confirmed from my reading, I think I talked to Mr. Box about this earlier, that is not on these drawings any longer. And briefly talking with Mr. Van Tiffelen, he indicated he wouldn't expect that would be on any future drawings because it would work against the water drainage. So that was my biggest concern, that was sort of tied in with the landscaping, even though it's a little bit of a gray area. So that's all I had. I had other thoughts on this earlier on, but we are at a different step of the process, and that's what I had for this evening. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tuckfield. Is there any other discussion? Anyone? Okay. At this time, I think we'll move to the public. Do we have a motion to open our meeting to the public?
So moved.
Mr. Bentley made the motion. Supported by Mr. Oliver. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. If you want to speak, please come to the podium, state your name and your address. Tonight, we're addressing the landscaping. The water issue by the river will be decided through engineering, and that comes later. So whoever would like to come up and talk, please come to the podium. Oh, I opened at 6:58.
Hi, my name is Carol Howell.
Yeah, pull your mic down a little bit.
Okay, my name is Carol Howell. I live at 19258 Lamplighter Trail. And on the landscaping, I know originally that they had said that they were going to put the pine trees on the berms. So now are you saying that you're just gonna put the pine trees along the river without building up any height to put them on?
Just so you know, we'll answer all the questions at the end. We're all writing these down, so we'll just take questions from the whole community, and then we'll answer everything at the end.
Okay, and then I just have one comment
Yes,
that
ma'am.
does not pertain to this, but when they took the township board to court over this, I believe that the people that lived along the river should have been informed on that also, so we could have been there.
Okay? Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else?
My name's Lynn Brikes, 19290 Lamplighter Trail. My question is, can we get a copy of this consent agreement?
It's a matter of public record.
Okay, so,
I think you'd have to ask the clerk's office.
okay, we can't get it from the township?
Not from the planning commission, but it would be available, I believe, at the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you.
You could send a FOIA request and they'll give it to you.
Okay. Anyone else?
My name is Ken Daniels, 47619, or 47, yeah, 619 Lamplighter Trail, sorry. I'd just like to say, like, the lack of notice for the residents, like, we got this we got our letter, I got my letter in the mail on a Friday before a holiday weekend. There could be several other residents that would like to be here, but they may have already left for a holiday weekend. I think it's kind of rude and bogus to send this out, just how it went down. So when it comes to the Drain Commission, I would like a little bit more advance notice. That way maybe we can not have to drag our child to a meeting. That'd be nice. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay.
Lynn Blossom and Keith Rumble. You should be able to speak now. You have to unmute yourself, but go ahead.
I know. Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay. I have a couple concerns. First of all, with the trees, they're talking about putting up a green belt or whatever they're going to do. Is this going to also block out the light and the noise that's going to definitely come through those trees and above the trees? I mean, this is backing right up to our subdivision, which I'm not sure. This is like a pretty sizable building because I have seen their other buildings and they're not 3 stories, they are 4 stories. They're 3 living stories, but there is a 4th story on that building. So I'm not sure how any of this can be blocked out, and it's really going to affect, you know, our quality of living basically. And, you know, I'm not sure any of this is ever going to be adequate, and it's really basically going to ruin the way we live basically. Between the pollution, the noise, the people, the light. I mean, what are they going to do about that?
Okay. Ms. Rossman, will you please state your name again and your address, please?
Yeah, Lynn Blossom, 47643 Lamplighter Trail. And I'm also offended by the name of it being Blossom, seeing as my last name is Blossom. So it's kind of like, you know, putting salt in a wound that the whole thing's named after my last name.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Did you have anything else, Lynn?
That's pretty much about it.
Okay, thanks. Is there anyone else, Mr. Box?
Not at this time.
Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak? Anyone?
Hi, my name is Alexis Daniels, 47619 Lamplighter Trail. And I'm not able to see this quite clearly. I've been trying to put my glasses on so I can see, but I'm concerned about the pathway. I would like if someone could kind of point out where that will be and the amount of space that will be in between the pathway and the river, so that I can better understand if I need to start, you know, thinking about the public viewing my children as they're playing in the yard that we thought was going to be private space for us. And I have 2 young girls, as one of them's here, and you know, I'm just wondering, what is that going to be like? Right now, we do have occasional, I don't know if you call them loiterers, who like to come from the Waldenburg Park that's already there, and they cross over. There's like a little patch of leaves and mulch and stuff. It's not very stable, but they cross over into our yard quite often. And I mean, we've never had to call the police or anything because they've never been disruptive, but they do walk there, and it's scary when you have young children. And I want to know, like, what safety measures are going to be there to prevent individuals from, if we're drawing more public into this area, to prevent individuals from, you know, creating a ruckus in the back, you know, viewing our personal belongings in our yard. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? All right. Mr. Box, would you like to address some of the items that were talked to tonight? Talked
Well,
about tonight?
I guess the most recent question with regards to the trail that would be on the next agenda item, it's not on this site plan you see
Okay.
before you, it'll be on the next one. As far as anyone walking on the trail crossing over, it will be on the opposite side of the river, so depending on how much water is in there, I would doubt that anyone is gonna walk through there, but the first question, I'm drawing a blank on the first.
Trees on the berm.
Oh, so the berm, yes, I'm not aware of this berm, that was on the original one in 2019, I was not here with the township. The plans that I'm looking at do not have a berm. I guess maybe if Mr. Izzy wants to talk about how tall these trees will be, but, no, I don't think they're planting them on a berm, and I don't think our engineering department would allow them to be planted on a berm, because a berm would essentially work, like a wall or a barrier for any higher water, and thus create problems downstream. So I don't think they would allow that anyways, on the backside of these buildings.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, please.
In response to the height of the trees, the proposed trees right now are 8 foot to 9 foot, variety of spruce, fir, white pine, arborvitaes. I believe, and I'm going back, I think the original intent of adding the berm was just to get some added volume and added height from the get-go, right from the beginning of the development. Obviously, because of the hydraulics that we're dealing with there, a berm probably would hurt us. Doesn't mean we couldn't put larger trees there, and quite honestly, we're probably going to end up putting bigger trees than what's on this plan anyways. So I think as far as a 36-inch berm that we were originally proposing, that we're not proposing anymore, could easily be made up by adding a couple of feet to these trees.
Okay. All right. Mr. Box?
So the other question, I think, was with regards to light and how it would affect the residents behind them. Again, I think that's something that will be handled through the engineering process, but our ordinances essentially have 0 light emissions at the property boundary, or 0 foot candles. So again, that's something that through the engineering process, if they can't establish that, then it would not be approved through the engineering department. So
Okay.
that's a hurdle that they'll still have to get through.
All right. Is there anything else on our list that we need to talk about? Huh? Oh, sound? Okay. I don't know if there would be any,
Yeah, I don't believe we have anything with regards to any measures to be taken for sound. We have the vegetative buffer that they're providing, as well as the large conservation easement. Beyond that, I don't think there's anything in our ordinance for sound that would be required.
I really believe most of the sound, you're going to hear a far larger, far greater decibel level coming from cars on Romeo Plank than you will from people using the parking lot.
gotcha. And that includes the public using the parking lot for the pathway too.
Yeah, that parking lot's only, boy, I think it's only 16 spaces or 20 spaces. It's located located nearer Romeo Plank.
Gotcha.
And so you get there and you have to walk a little bit of a distance till you get to
Okay.
the pathway.
Thank you.
I just for clarification, we have 2 different agenda items. This Walden Park is a single story, correct?
Yes,
The one
correct.
that we voted on today, so.
Correct.
The height that was discussed in the comment is not pertinent to this particular hearing and should not
correct.
be considered by the commission because it's a single story.
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you for the correction.
And
Mr. Loy.
any development would be bound by we do have a sound ordinance, so just the normal citizenry sound ordinance.
All right, I think we've covered everything. Yes?
Late notice,
Yes?
late notice of public hearing.
All right, at this time, I'd like to have a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second it then.
Okay, or motion by Mr. Oliver, supported by Mr. Shudo. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. At this time, I'd like to bring it back to the commissioners. Are there any final comments before we make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I just had one question for Mr. Box. Mr. Box, I know we talked about it briefly, but were you able to look into the notification on this at all? We got all of the notification? It was in the newspapers, it was mailed out per?
It was mailed out per the 300-foot requirement, correct parcel numbers, correct location, and they were delivered the 5 days, which is required per our ordinance.
Do you know, and sorry, but just I had some questions on it, just want to make sure. Do you know what newspapers it or newspaper would have gone
Site
to?
plan does not require newspaper
Site plan is not,
publication.
you're right. That's why. I was trying to find it and I couldn't find it and I was wondering. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tuckfield. We close the public hearing at 7:08. All right. Is there anyone else that has any discussion? Mr. Spatafora?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mario, I'm sure this question has probably been asked before. I've only been on this particular planning commission since January, but was there any attempt in the past? There's a long, thin strip parcel that stands between Walden Park and Blossom Meadows. You know, the parcel that divides, I guess indirectly, it would affect the landscape on the southern boundary of Walden Park and the northern boundary, if you will, of Blossom Meadows along the, public parking lot for the walkway. There's just a piece, it stands out like a sore thumb. Were there any attempts to, to perhaps talk to that owner and,
Yes, sir.
to just tie everything together, which would have made it contiguous?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Spatafora. Through the process, we have an off-site sanitary sewer project that we're working on in order to bring sewer to the north end of this project. It starts at the church to the south. Most of the property on this side of Romeo Plank we already own, but we don't own everything. So we've been forced to interact with some of the residents there, some of the property owners, in order to try to obtain not only permanent sanitary sewer easements, but temporary construction easements as well. Through the course of those discussions, I know one of the property owners, in exchange for the construction easement and the permanent easement, we're paying for their sanitary sewer hookup and their fees. The other parcel that I think you're referring to, that one's taken a little bit longer. That property is owned by a family trust. The original owners, they've passed in the last couple of years.
Sure.
I believe the family representative, the family trustees, maybe one has bought it from the remaining trustees, other members of the family. Good to work with, good people. We've talked about some numbers. There's some floodplain issues there. They're dealing with, we're dealing with. I don't know that there's enough there really to make it worth our while. We did talk about some preliminary numbers. It never really went any further than that. I think we got more than enough. We bit off more than what we need here, but we're going to see it through. I believe there was some preliminary discussion about trying to maybe link the pathway in the back of the property so that path could maybe eventually continue up to would be 22 Mile Road. But very, very preliminary conversations.
I understand, and thank you for that explanation.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
No
Thank you,
further
Mr.
questions.
Thank you, Mr. Spatafora. Anyone else? All right, do we have a motion on this item?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Oliver?
I move we move forward on this site plan, Walden Park, permanent parcel 0828101009.
Okay.
I support his motion.
Motion by Mr. Oliver, supported by Mr. Provenzano. Mr. Bentley, would you please call the roll?
I will. Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Provenzano,
Yes.
Mr. Shudo,
Yes.
Mr. Spatafora,
Yes.
Mr. Bentley, yes. Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Oh, opposed? Let's do the opposed, but I think we got everybody. Okay. All right, next item, site plan, Walden Village Blossom Meadows. Permanent parcel 0828 301 001 002 005 006 007 008 009 010 011 08 28 151 003 004 007 0828 351 001 002 003, located on the east side of Romeo Plank, a quarter mile north of 21 Mile. Section 28, M&C Limited of Utica LLC petitioner. Mr. Box.
I think Mr. Skirdo is going to discuss this.
Mr. Skirdo, then.
Okay, we're just a little bit south now. It's a larger parcel. Do you have a site plan you can bring up,
Yes.
Josh? Again, the site plan, as you see here, the area within the black square at the southwest portion of the site, that's called Blossom Meadows. That is a building used for independent senior housing as well as assisted living, and it will be used for a memory care unit also. I believe the maximum height is 3 stories, and the maximum number of units there is 160. The remainder of the site, as you see, it comes along, it enters through Romeo Plank Road, farther to the north, and it circles around, and actually is a shared drive between Blossom Meadows and the village, farther to the south, right, it's actually encapsulated by that black square. That will contain 15 3-story apartment buildings, again, age restricted. Near the upper, the northernmost access point within, oh, Josh, can you take your cursor? Can you hit that center square where the clubhouse is? Is it possible? Right there, there's gonna be a clubhouse and a pool for all the residents. This unit there also, in terms of landscaping, it will continue the conservation easement along the river. The pathway that we spoke about will be included along that riverfront walk. Near the south end, with the bottom of where that green meets, that's where the connection will be made to the Waldenburg Park. This area here on the north property line, do you have the one with the, keep going back, Josh, with the circles? Along the north, it's in the brighter green, that's gonna be more of a natural area that will have 27 large and small trees and 60 small and large evergreens included in there. Along Romeo Plank, which is to the west, it's the 2 oval areas in dark blue. Those will contain 20 small and large deciduous trees and 20 small and large evergreens. Along the conservation easement, which is farther to the east, it's where the 2 green colors made up. They will include 87 small and large evergreens and 44 small and large deciduous trees. And finally, along the south edge, in the bright green at the bottom of the screen, that will include 40 small and large evergreens, as well as 19 small and large deciduous trees along that greenbelt edge. The perimeter green belts do exceed 8 feet as required by ordinance. Again, everything I said in the last presentation pertains here. There is a large, you see a kind of a blank space in the middle of the 2 housing developments, the one in the north for the village and one at the south. That large blank space that goes on an angle from the upper right down to the lower left, that's where the ITC corridor runs. And I'm here for any more detailed questions on those.
Okay, thank you. Is this also part of the consent?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Petitioner, come on up, Mr. Izzy.
Good evening, Mario Izzy, MNC Limited, MJC Companies, 46600 Romeo Plank, suite number 5.
Thank you.
Macomb Township.
Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
Nothing to add, sir. If I could, just, there was one comment from the caller about a 4-story building, and there, I assure you, there are no 4-story buildings or plans in this package proposed.
Okay.
We're bound by the consent judgment, 3-story plus a height of
52 feet.
52 feet, thank you. So there's no intention to build a 4-story building here.
Okay.
So just to clarify.
And, you know, I think some of our community was a little confused about which was which.
Yes, sir.
And somebody mentioned sound, lighting.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk about the lighting for these buildings that you're going to have that are 3 stories?
Most of the lighting will be mounted to the building itself, and if you notice, the buildings, the back end of the buildings, they all, basically, we share a common backyard. The lighting for the parking lots and the driveways, that's going to be directed and aimed towards the roads, the parking lots, obviously for safety. We have to abide by any nuisance ordinances as well, sound, lighting. If for whatever reason there's an issue when this project is built or during the process, we want to be a good neighbor. I'm sure the ordinance officer will contact me and we'll deal with it and we'll take care of it. If a light has to be removed, we can certainly handle that. That's not an issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Petitioners, commissioners.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr.
Chairman.
Bentley.
Mr. Izzy?
Yes, sir.
What is the intent for the lighting on the pathway? Will there be any lighting for security purposes, or will it be generally not used at night?
I think that's a great point, and I think it's something that we could maybe discuss further as this project develops. I'm open to, again, I'd like to have a dialogue with the Planning Commission and with the Planning Department. Any suggestions for, obviously, for security, but yet we don't want it to be obnoxious to the neighbors across the river. I believe we're about 260 feet away from the center of the river, plus there's screening, and depending on the time of the year, when the leaves are on or not on, so that's something that we may have to maybe take small bites of the apple as far as putting lighting in, and maybe the next year we put a little bit more in, but yet not go overboard so that we offend the neighbors across the way, because at the end of the day, we want it to be safe for active adults and for all the taxpayers in Macomb Township. So that's something I'd love to work with you on. We can add or subtract lighting along that path as we see fit. We can make it a condition of the site plan this evening if you'd like. It's not a huge ticket item, and I'm sure I'll be in front of you again for another project in the future, and you can certainly hold my feet to the flame when the time comes. So,
Okay. Very good, Mr. Bentley.
I'm good, I believe.
thank you.
Mr. Spatafora?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Izzy, in the previous agenda item, I want to say it was Ms. Daniels who came up and spoke very concerned about the privacy issues in the backyards of probably her lot and a lot of her neighbors that are along Lamplighter Drive. On the plans, the landscaping plans that are drawn, we see a lot of vegetation that covers both sides of the planned walkway, starting south on Waldenberg Park and meandering along, as we see it in our plans, to the parking lot on the north boundary of Blossom Meadows and Blossom Village. Can you elaborate more perhaps on that landscaping as far as privacy? In other communities, you see walkways and you have what amounts over time heavy vegetation on both sides of the walkways. Is this something that you are looking at, as far as the trees that are listed on the landscaping plan, or the vegetation, the plants that are listed, as they grow, it'll be like a total screening privacy where people along that walkway will have basically a private walk that will not interfere perhaps either with sight lines to the backyards of those residents on Lamplighter Drive?
As far as the I guess, the longevity of the path and the landscape that's there. We're responsible for the maintenance of the path. We're responsible for the maintenance of the landscape material that we're putting there. So we're contributing this to the township, to the community as a general public benefit. This is something that, again, like the lighting that was suggested, I think this is something we're all going to have to work through a little bit, and we'll be open to suggestions. What I can envision over time, maybe the next 7 to 10 years, as these trees that we plant, whether they're 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet, maybe the bottom 5, 6, 7 feet, those spruce trees, they're clipped up so that nobody could hide behind a tree. I could, for security purposes. But at least the top, the canopies will be left alone so that it will stop noise, dust, light, that sort of thing. Try to help enhance the screening from the other side of the river, from the east side of the river. So that's what I envision as far as the maintenance goes. Does that?
Yeah, it does. The only area that I see that's obviously open is the planned path along the ITC that crosses the ITC corridor. But generally, the landscape planned, it looks good as far as, I think, the intent of what you want to do. Right. And I think as the vegetation and landscaping matures with the landscape issues that comes up, it seems to afford a nice degree and screen of privacy along there, which it's not only going to benefit the residents here, but as we read in our materials, it's going to be, it's available for Macomb Township residents at large.
Yes, sir.
Whether they choose to park at Waldenburg Park or choose to park, if there's space permitting, in that particular area off of Romeo Plank.
Yes, sir. And if I may add, one of the because these aren't condominiums that we're selling off to units, or units that we're selling off to individual buyers, you're not dealing with a homeowners association, which sometimes can be a little easier depending on the community than others. You're dealing with the landowner, with the landlord, so it's one phone call. Any issues, any maintenance issues that come up, and it will happen. Shouldn't be much, but there will be issues that will come up, and we'll address those as they do.
So for the foreseeable future, MJC or through whatever property management that you will control will handle all of this itself.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Spadafora.
Anyone else on this end?
What about over here?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Tuckfield.
I have one for Mr. Izzy. Are you anticipating hours on this path? I believe the park that it's going to be connected to has hours. Are you putting a gate on or anything of that nature?
Good question. No gates, no security gates as far as that goes, but that's probably something that we want to add as a detail, as a note. Whatever the park hours are, if it's dawn to dusk, those would be the hours that we would formally allow people to actively use not only the parking lot, but the path as well. I could see our residents, our tenants. I'm not a good sleeper either. If I got up in the middle of the night and wanted to go walk around outside, I could see myself walking up and down the path, assumably with a flashlight for safety, security reason. But I don't think we would limit our residents from, if they wanted to use that path. There'll be benches on the path as well if you wanted to sit down and maybe listen to the wildlife or watch the wildlife there. So that'll be there as well. But I don't think we'll limit our residents, but we would probably want to try to reduce the amount of general public coming in and out of there at all hours of the night, maybe just dawn to dusk, like the Waldenburg Park as well.
Yeah, and I don't know what our leeway is here, but it would seem that it would be appropriate to at least keep it in sync with the park, so that you don't have.
I agree with that.
Connections moving out of whack.
I agree with that.
Which
yes.
also might play to the light issue, because I believe Waldenburg is dawn to dusk, so there shouldn't be a lot of general public going through there after dark anyway. So that was my only question. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bentley.
Just a clarification to maybe Mr. Aloya. The public currently, do they have rights to walk along the creek at this time? Or is that considered private property? And the reason I bring that up is this pathway affords protection in some respects. It provides an open area beyond it towards the water that might easily identify anybody that's going towards the creek per se. But it allows people to walk and enjoy along that creek, which may or be happening right now, with no means of directing their path and keeping them on the west side of that creek. But I guess I'm not familiar enough with waterways like this, of this size, as to whether or not the public has rights to walk along it, fish, do whatever.
So I'm not familiar with the width of the watershed in this particular tributary, the Middle Branch, and so that would be, normally it's public, but it's a utilitarian reason. I mean, it's a tributary and it provides water flow and drainage for the surrounding areas. Certainly if there's private land, it's difficult to, if it's private land, the people are not permitted to go on there unless the landowner permits. There's going to be some width of this path dedicated, my understanding from the consent judgment. I'd have to look at the provisions again because I wasn't necessarily looking at it for this purpose today, but I was looking more at the landscaping and the final site plan requirements. But I believe that it addresses in the consent judgment that for instance, the parking lot will be dedicated for public use and the pathway to allow the public to be able to access that at reasonable time. Your question is regarding the adjacent property. I'd have to look a little bit closer, but the adjacent property, I believe, would remain private.
My question would be directed at the current, if this was not approved, currently, is there an easement along this waterway that would allow the public to use it anyway? Is it currently, can it currently be used? There's discussion about how do we preclude, people from walking along this waterway. Now they're 200 and some feet away to the west of that waterway. My concern is there really any restrictions now to the public to walk along that waterway?
Again, this is a drain, so it's a public tributary, and it's used for drainage purposes. It's not necessarily an easement which invites the public to be able to walk along it. Certainly, public members may walk along it and fish, but there are safety reasons why the Drain Commission would not encourage that.
Right.
So there's no declared easement that states that the public may walk and fish and do all those things. You're not going to find that. What you're going to find is it's there for drain purposes.
And the property line goes directly to the center line of that waterway?
There's a width pursuant to the drain code that would identify that width. That is correct.
Correct. Okay.
Mr. Commissioner, if I may add to that. So my understanding, we own to the center line of the drain. That is a public drain. The beneficiary is Macomb County Drain Office. On the east side of that drain, when that property was platted, or I believe it was platted at the time, the standard at the time was a 100-foot wide drain easement. The beneficiary, again, Macomb County Public Works. As Mr. Loya had mentioned, it's not for general public use, but it's more for drainage than anything. So somebody that wanted to go walk up and down over there, I'm a hunter. If I wanted to go hunt over there, I probably couldn't bow hunt that on their side. I don't own the property. Drain office wouldn't give me permission to go over there to do that. So it's not something I could do or collect rocks or whatever. On our side right now, there's currently a 60-foot wide, call it a statutory easement, and the drain office is the beneficiary. Same conditions apply. So the general public couldn't go up and walking up and down that, use it as like a park, if that's what you're, maybe the direction you're going, if somebody wanted to go mushroom collecting or harvesting or that kind of thing. Maybe even a fly fisherman. I don't think they have the ability to do that.
Yeah, I'm thinking just walking along the creek.
Yeah, I don't think, technically, they would be trespassing.
Okay. Thank you.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Anyone else? All right, let's move to the public portion.
Do I have a motion to open our agenda item to the public?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mr. Oliver,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Spatafora. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, so is there anyone here that would like to speak to this item?
Time.
And it is 7:35.
Dennis Stangy, 47767 Lamplighter Trail. As far as I know, on the east side of the river, that belongs to the subdivision. That's our easement. So typically, people cannot go there unless you live in the subdivision. That's my understanding. Now, there may be different, I don't know. Another question, how many retention ponds are they going to put along there on the west side of the river?
I think there's like 4.
Okay.
And how close is that path going to be to the river? Because that floods in there big time. I mean, last week there, as far as you could see, was water to the west from my house and in my backyard. So those are the main things I want to talk about, and that's it.
All right, thank you.
Okay?
As the last item, we'll answer all those, everybody's questions at the end.
Okay.
So, thank you, sir. Next, anybody? No one?
Online.
All right, yeah, we're gonna check online.
I'm not sure if their hand is still up from the previous time, but Lynn and Keith, if you had a question, you're able to unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, I just want to dispute, he's saying it's only 3-story. Yeah, it's 3 living stories, but the last, we can't see any of your video, by the way. We can't see any of these plans, anything that's going on the screen. But the last plans I got from the township had 3 stories, and then it had a peak, and he said it was 54 feet. That is like a 4th story. Granted, there's nobody living up there, but it is 4 stories.
And this is Keith Rumble, same address. And I mentioned at the last meeting, your trees are not going to be able to be tall enough for the people in that 3rd story to look in our kids' bedrooms. Our kids' bedrooms are on the back of the house. These people are going to be able to look right into our kids' bedrooms. I'm sure that doesn't concern you, but it concerns us.
Any privacy we've ever had in our yard, it will become unlivable, basically. That's it.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you, guys. Is there anyone else, Mr. Box?
At this time.
Okay. Anybody else here that would like to speak? All right, then we'll go ahead and close the public portion at 7:38. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Shudo, supported by Mr. Provenzano. All in favor?
Aye.
Nays? Motion passes. Commissioners, any final comments? Mr. Box, would you like to address, and Mr. Izzy, would you like to address some of the comments that we heard from our public?
With regards to the number of retention ponds, I can see on this plan here that there's one large one. I think there might already be a few that exist out there, but the total number, I'll defer to Mr. Izzy. I guess I can see a couple more on here now at the southern end. I'll defer to Mr. Izzy with how many total. The tree height along the conservation area, I think a lot of those trees that he's mentioning will grow over time. So they may not initially be the desirable height, but I think many of those species grow quite tall. Just how tall, it's tough to say. Every tree is a little bit different, just like every person, but I think that they do grow quite a bit. And then the pathway, how near to the river, I think he mentions, was it 200 feet from the river? Roughly 200 feet from the edge of the river. So there's a substantial space between the pathway and the river, and then there's additional space and green space buffer between the pathway and the buildings themselves.
Okay, Mr. Izzy, did you have anything else to add?
There's currently 4 detention ponds proposed.
Okay,
Subject to final engineering and final hydraulics. That number could go up or go down depending on what the hydraulic analysis, what we propose and what all the reviewing agencies, what they respond with. So that number could go up or go down.
anything else, sir? No, one of our
I'll let it-
citizens talked about 3 stories and people looking into the,
Unfortunately, I can't comment as to people's habits of looking into people's windows. That's not the intent to build any new development. I'm just gonna let that comment stand. I mean, if
Okay.
something like that happens, then obviously call the police. It'd be no different with the neighbor living next door at the current home. So that's certainly not the intention here. And as far as the trees go that we are planting, what you see on the plan, what's proposed is smaller than what we're gonna actually end up installing. These trees will grow, some of them will die, they will be replaced, they will be maintained, and it'll be a high-quality development. So,
okay.
any other questions or any comments that I might have missed?
No. Commissioners, anything else?
Thank you, sir.
Anything else before we go to a motion? Okay. And once again, this is a consent judgment, so we're only really deciding landscaping tonight. Do I have someone that would like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
If there's
Spatafora?
no further discussion or questions at this time, I would like to make a motion to recommend approval of the site plan for Walden Village and Blossom Meadows. The permanent parcel numbers, as you stated on record, located on the east side of Romeo Plank Road, a quarter mile south of 21 Mile Road in section 28.
Okay, thank you, sir. Do I have a second?
Support.
Supported, motion by Mr. Spatafora, second by Mr. Oliver. Mr. Bentley, please call the roll.
Mr. Spatafora?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield?
Yes.
Mr. Provenzano?
Yes.
Mr. Shudo?
Yes.
Mr. Bentley? Yes. Mr. Hardy?
Yes. Motion passes. Okay. Next item, public comments on, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, old business. Planned unit development, general design plan. Permanent parcels, 0836353, 033, 0836, 353, 023, 0836, 353, 030, and 0836 353 018, located on the north side of Hall Road, east of North Avenue, Section 36. Carl Zimmerman, petitioner. Mr. Box.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. You guys are aware, this was on the agenda last time, and I believe it was briefly discussed. I was not here at that meeting, so I'm not sure just how much of it was discussed, but I know it was discussed and tabled to this meeting. One of the items we were looking for before we would move forward was the PUD agreement that Mr. Aloya, I think you received late on, was it Thursday or Friday, from the petitioner's attorney. So I guess I'll defer to you as far as the status of that review, but beyond that, I think we're waiting for that review before any further discussion.
Okay.
Yes, as we spoke to about this last time, in order for the Planning Commission to forward its recommendation to the Board of Trustees, it would need to approve the general design plan as well as have an acceptable PUD agreement to submit to the board for its final consideration. The last time we were here, there were elements of the general design plan that needed to be addressed. My understanding is those have been addressed with our planning department and engineering department. Since we've been here last time, I have had a meeting with counsel for the petitioner as well as conversations. I submitted to them our suggested edits to their initial draft. I did not get their response edits until late Thursday after the Planning Commission packets went out. At that time, informed council and the petitioner that I would recommend to table this item to the planning commission. Given the fact that Friday was the Friday before holiday weekend, many administrators were leaving for the weekend, and Monday was a holiday, so it just seemed impossible at that point to finalize the agreement. I will represent to the planning commission that I have been actively reviewing the agreement. There are more edits that definitely need to be made and will be made and suggested to the petitioner. We will be aiming to get this on the agenda July 20th. I am shooting to get my comments to administration this week for their review, and to opposing to the Developers Council this week, so that we can expedite this process. But there are material items in that agreement that we need to finalize, definitely, that are very important before I would recommend the agreement to this planning commission.
Okay. Do we need to postpone in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a motion to postpone this item?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion to postpone this general design plan.
Okay. Motion made by Mr. Oliver.
Do we need a date?
I would say July 20th.
Till
Okay.
July 20th.
Till July 20th.
I'll support that.
Supported by Mr. Shudo. Mr. Bentley, call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Mr. Shudo,
Yes.
Mr. Spatafora,
Yes.
Mr. Bentley, yes. Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield,
Yes.
and Mr. Provenzano.
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, let's move on to public comments on non-agenda items. Is there anyone that would like to speak tonight? Anyone? And I believe this is our last Zoom meeting, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Then we'll move to commissioners' comments. Anyone? No one? Okay. Then we'll move to the Macomb Township Board of Trustees Liaison update. Mr. Charles Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, sir.
Well, actually, last meeting was a little bit light. We didn't have a lot of agenda items. The Board of Trustees approved all the Planning Commission items, so that all was voted on and approved. The fire department, we bought some equipment, a thermal imaging camera. We had some old ones, and we've updated and bought new ones, and some extrication equipment like jaws of life and stuff like that. That was about it.
Okay.
So that's all I
Okay.
can report tonight.
All right. ZBA, Mr. Tuckfield.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just wanted to briefly mention, we had a ZBA meeting on Thursday. It was a very long one, as those of us who were there will remember. We were there till almost 10 o'clock for a 6:30 start, so it was quite a long meeting. I won't go into the action too much from that evening, other than to say we had substantial public comment on all aspects of the development, which is in this particular case the Meyer development, and I will be planning on summarizing the comments we have and bringing them with me for the meeting on the 20th. Assuming that it still happens at that point, I believe that was where it was last time we had, and that it was good to see a lot of residents out, even if, as is a lot of the cases when we see a lot of residents, it was a very it was a difficult meeting for a lot of people. So that's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tuckfield. All right. Planning Department items.
Nothing major to report this evening. I will point out that we got in contact with a local resident, a young lady here who is a township resident who just graduated, and we're going to be bringing her on as an intern. It's not official yet, but through the COVID process, she was unable to do an internship, and so therefore a lot of the positions she's been applying for, understandably so, has not been able to land a full-time position because she has zero experience because she didn't do an internship. So she reached out to us. She's a resident, so we're going to work with her and bring her on in as an intern.
Okay. Then the last item for the evening is a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Spatafora,
Support.
Supported by Mr. Oliver. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.